Kelly Martin here with you as we continue in our small group series on prayer. And today we're going to go over chapter 5, which is titled Roots. Now, in this chapter, the author John talks about storms. He talks about how you may be currently facing a storm, or how as Christians we should prepare for the future storms to come. Now, as Christians, we know that this earth is not our home, and as we wait, we are called to advance the gospel. And with that will come difficulty. But how we respond to the unpredicted storms and difficulties of life, it matters. The author states that prayers are our roots. The roots do the hard work of strengthening the tree, but this hard work is hidden work. Now, if you know me, you probably know that I have a little beagle named River. And what we like to do in the morning is take a little stroll around the neighborhood. I'll grab my coffee mug and River will smell every blade of grass. And we're pretty used to hearing the neighborhood dogs bark when we walk by. But one morning, not only did we hear the dogs barking, but we heard a screen door slam open. And as I looked over, I see this large dog charging our way. And in the heat of the moment, I responded in a couple different ways. At first, I thought, okay, this dog is coming for me. I'm about to get attacked. Brace for impact. I froze and I put my arm up to protect myself. But then I see the dog make eye contact towards River, and she starts charging after River. So I then think, okay, how can I get this to stop? So I start screaming at the dog, stop, stop, stop. And I then see the dog is not listening to me and continuing to go after River. And so after I drop my mug in the street and it breaks into pieces, all I think to do next is cry out for help. I thought, if I get in the way of this dog and try to control this in my own strength, this large dog is going to attack me and my dog, and I'm going to make matters much worse. So I just start crying out for help. And the neighbor comes out and then yells at the dog and commands it to stop. And the owner gets over the dog and gets it into a position of submission to the owner and stops the dog fight from turning way worse than what already happened. And I think, in life, when random things come at us, we tend to respond in so many different ways. And most of the time, we don't respond the correct way, right? When unexpected difficulty and suffering comes our way, the discomfort that pain brings can lead us to respond in so many different ways. We can end up deciding to keep it to ourselves, to isolate, to try to cope and comfort ourselves in our own ways. We, a lot of the times, try to take it into our own hands and control the circumstance, but usually end up making it worse for ourselves. Or maybe we get so frustrated and angry that we vent to everyone else except God. See, when we suffer, it can reveal a lot about what we actually cling to, what we are actually rooted in. It exposes us in such a way. And I love how the author states that God is aware of this. He knows what we actually hope in, what we actually cling to, what we actually trust in, what we're actually rooted in. Yet he remains committed and faithful to us. See, when we face difficulty and suffering, what if we saw that pain that we're wrestling with as something that may somehow draw us closer to depending on God? What if we chose to cry out to God and rely on him for strength? I love this quote by Charles Spurgeon. It says, "I have learned to kiss the wave that throws me against the rock of ages." See, as difficulties push us to depend upon God in prayer, we can be encouraged that he is with us. He wants to empower us and give us strength in our weakness. And he can relate to the suffering that we are facing. As we look to the example of Jesus and in his suffering, I love how the author breaks it down in this chapter, just the way that Jesus responded in his suffering, his heart posture, the actions of, first valuing the fact that he has community near him. See, and he's in the garden suffering, knowing that he's about to die soon, and he values being with community in prayer with the disciples. Jesus, in his suffering, admits that he is weak, and he confesses this, and he chooses to rely on God for strength. He refers to God as Abba Father. In such an intimate way, he cries out to the God who knows him, who loves him, the God who listens and cares for him. Jesus confidently knew in God's ability to do the impossible. And more importantly here, he was persistent in prayer, even unto death. See, Jesus remained submitted and surrendered to the Father. In his last hours in the garden, he's suffering. He says, let it be your will. He submitted, he surrendered to what God's will was because he knew it was the best plan. He knew who his Father was. Do we know who God is? Do we root ourselves in scriptures to remind ourselves who God is? I love in Psalm 1 verses 1 through 3, it says, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seats of scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither." Do we, as God's children, plant ourselves in his scriptures to know who he is, so that when we cry out in prayer, we know who we're trusting in? We know that he's a Father that loves us, that cares for us, that is good, that is all powerful, that is trustworthy. See, when we actually come to the Father with surrendered hearts, he strengthens our hands. But what he does when we rely on him in our weakness is he shows up in his power and he strengthens us. He carries us through the suffering that we face, and he gets the glory. And at the same time, our will is submitted to his will. He molds us and shapes us to look more and more like Jesus, a humble, suffering servant. See, wherever you're at, I just want to encourage you, before you break up out into small group discussion, I want to encourage you, whether you are facing difficulty now or you are positioning yourself to prepare for the future difficulties that are to come, choose to be that tree that is rooted in prayer, that is empowered by the true living water. In your difficulty, choose to turn to God. Don't try to do it in your own strength. Don't try to isolate or figure it out on your own. Choose to turn to him in prayer. Surround yourself with the body of believers that he's placed you in, and admit your weakness. Admit that you need strength. He will show up and empower you. He will strengthen you for what he has called you to do. Whatever the cost, remember, he is worthy. This life is not our own. This earth is not our home. Whatever he calls you to, he is worthy. Let our lives be worship to him, with hands and hearts surrendered to his will and way. You can trust in him. His plan is good. It is the best one for us. So may his peace be with you and his grace empower you for all that he's called you to. What he's called you to will be for your good and his glory. Amen.